I guess, do you think that there are any downsides to this? That when we set a precedent in the world that people just drop bombs and ask questions later, I mean, does that really make us safer?
A precedent's been set, though. Like, this is not anything new. I mean, I wish it was, right?
But I mean,
and that's the case with so many elements of this
maybe,
administration.
but like, precedent's been set by who? I feel like when we put the United
Barack
States
Obama,
in the same,
George H.
no,
W.
but I'm
Bush.
talking about like, what is the justification, right? And then if we put ourselves in the same bucket as the Russias of the world, or the Houthis, or whatever it is, like the other people who act kind of lawlessly on the global stage, I don't think that's the category of states that we want to be aligned with.
In today's video, Abby Phillip and Jemele Hill destroy Peter Meijer and Kelly Jane Torrance on CNN's Table for Five in one of the most heated and revealing debates yet. The panel dives into Donald Trump's shocking actions, from pardoning a crypto felon tied to his empire to authorizing military strikes without approval and even demanding $200 million from the Justice Department to cover his prosecution costs. Abby and Jemele hold nothing back, exposing the dangerous erosion of institutional checks and the growing threat of unchecked presidential power. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip and Jemele Hill shut down Peter Meijer and Kelly Jane Torrance on CNN's Table for Five.
Look, I don't want to overstate the East Room thing, but it struck a nerve with a lot of people, because I think a lot of people just asked themselves, I didn't know that you could just tear down the White House without asking anybody, okay? And the answer is Trump realized that there was actually nothing standing in his way, and so he did it. It's pretty amazing.
I think that defines really a lot of his presidency. Is we have been under this false assumption that somehow these institutions will defend themselves blindly. And the reality is that the institutions only hold up as much as the people are willing to defend them. And what he has quickly realized is that, as it's a phrase I've used on your show, Abby, is he is the who gon' check me boo president, because there is nobody that is going to stand in his way, because we have allowed politeness to overtake common sense. And so he's relying on the fact that we're not willing to be impolite in order to check his authority. He can ignore all the rules that he wants. But to me, the only way we will understand how dangerous a lot of these things are, and it's beyond just reconstructing the ballroom, is if somebody else comes in and does the same thing where they don't have, I guess, maybe not the majority of the country, where they didn't win the majority of the vote. Because I promise you, if a Democrat comes in and runs the same game plan, maybe that's the only way the Republicans will understand that checks and balances are here for a reason.
Well, wait a second. I have to admit that I think they actually did in some ways. And, Abby, I have to disagree. I think it really struck a chord, but with the coastal elites. I really doubt your average American, especially ones affected by the government shutdown, are worried about this. But let's look at some facts. Barack Obama and Joe Biden had donations of millions of dollars to each of their inaugural committees, and these were to put on big parties, mostly attended by the well-heeled. Now, who donated? With Obama in 2022, it was AT&T, Microsoft, Chevron. With Joe Biden, his inaugural, it was again Microsoft, AT&T, a lot of these big companies that certainly have a lot of business before the government, as we've certainly seen with Microsoft in Trump's first term. So I sort of disagree that this is sort of unprecedented to take donations.
I don't know but I mean, look, every president takes donations for their inaugural. That's actually how the inaugural works. President Trump actually dwarfs both Obama and Biden in terms of how much they took in, and then he added on top of that invitations to the heads of those companies to the inauguration, almost in exchange for their donations. I just don't know why that is comparable to, this is 200 and something $1 million. It's $250 million.
At least it's for something and not just parties.
Yeah,
it's for
I understand.
For the
Look,
people of America,
and I'll take
really.
your point that, like,
for the people of America. For the people of America. It's for the donors who could go to the dinner.
In this heated debate between Abby Phillip and Jemele Hill versus Kelly Jane Torrance, I'm siding with Abby and Jemele because their points cut to the core of how fragile our democratic systems have become. Abby is absolutely right to point out that institutions only hold up as long as the people within them are willing to defend them. What we've seen in recent years is a dangerous willingness to look the other way when power is being abused, and that kind of complacency invites chaos. Kelly Jane Torrance tries to argue that Trump's fundraising and inaugural donations are no different from those of Obama or Biden, but that comparison falls apart quickly. Sure, every president raises money for their inauguration, but what Trump did went far beyond the norm. His inaugural committee raised over $200 million, and a large portion of that money became tied to allegations of self-dealing, inflated expenses, and corporate influence. This wasn't just about celebration, it was about access and power being sold to the highest bidder. Jemele Hill's point about Trump's behavior being a test is also spot on. Every time he pushes a boundary and no one stops him, it becomes a green light for the next violation. It's not trolling, it's conditioning, and the longer we allow that, the weaker our institutions become. Abby and Jemele are right to insist that accountability and integrity aren't optional. They're the backbone of democracy. Without them, the system collapses from within.
How?
I'm not going to defend Biden or Obama. I think if Trump does anything well, he provides a visual metaphor. You know, less Americans are reading. We need pictures. We need to see corruption in front of us. I think, listen, people are going to criticize him. I mean, Trump, he's the one who's going to have to live there for 7 more years. So I think it's good.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah, and it's going to take a long time to build it because he's not allowed to rely on
well,
documented
trust me,
immigrants
it's going to
anymore.
be fast because he wants to see it before he leaves.
Yes, listen. You know who's encouraging him to focus on this project? People in boats off the coast of Venezuela. They are more than happy to go. You know what? Focus on this. I'm happy for him to find a new little pet project. Prevents him from thinking about Portland. It's great, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not. Listen, this is just one small thing, right? But there are all the other things. He wants the Justice Department to pay him for prosecuting him.
For the chairs.
I mean, look, that's another $250 million that he wants to change hands. How much of this, should the American people really take?
I mean, we'll have elections coming up, right? I mean, that will gauge some of that. But I mean, he's the you can just do things president, right? Like when it came to this ballroom, a lot of the complaints were he didn't follow the process. He should have gone through the commission. Yeah, we probably would have approved this after 18 months of red tape and everything else. Like, no. I just hope what he did to the East Wing. And the first thing I had to do was figure out what the East Wing was. I realized I think I went in there one time. It's got like a ramp and you look off to the side.
If Aaron Sorkin had focused on that, he wouldn't have touched it.
100%. Aaron Sorkin's
iconic
really
show.
to blame here for not raising the prestige of the East Wing in the American public conception. But that sense of like, can he bring this same level of brazen disregard for kind of red tape and NIMBY rules to getting more nuclear power plants built, to expanding all the areas where we haven't been able to get things through for permitting? So I think this is a very great sign that we have a YIMBY president for once.
But here's the thing. I don't think people are bothered by the fact that the White House is getting a makeover. I don't think people care about that part. I think what people care about is the sort of pay-for-play system that he seems to have created in his presidency. Like, I'm not.
That's also like every president too. I mean,
not to this degree. Not to this degree.
But maybe it'll be so visual and so big that people will start paying attention. I think every chair should have a plaque.
It's also the
a bribe from
optics
Apple.
of doing this, as Abby pointed out, during a shutdown where you have TSA workers not reporting to work because they haven't been paid in 3 weeks. You have that going on at the same time where you're trying to make this symbol of your own presidency. Like, it just feels very much that if he had it his way, much like we've seen with everything, it's like he put his face on every single.
You know what really stands out in this debate between Gianmarco Soresi and Jemele Hill versus Peter Meijer? It's how clearly it exposes the divide between those who see Trump's actions as bold leadership and those who recognize them for what they really are, a blatant display of ego and privilege. I'm siding with Jemele and Gianmarco here because their take isn't about political rivalry. It's about accountability and respect for the institutions that hold democracy together. Jemele hits the nail on the head when she points out that people aren't angry about the White House renovations themselves. They're angry about the timing and the message it sends. How can you justify extravagant remodeling projects while federal workers are missing paychecks during a shutdown? It's not just tone deaf, it's a slap in the face to Americans struggling to get by. Peter Meijer, on the other hand, tries to frame Trump's actions as breaking through bureaucratic barriers. But that argument falls flat. Ignoring process isn't innovation. It's recklessness. The rules are there to ensure transparency and fairness, not to slow progress for the sake of it. When Trump sidesteps them to serve his own image, it's not about getting things done faster, it's about consolidating power. Gianmarco's sharp observation about Trump wanting his name plastered everywhere captures it perfectly. This isn't leadership, it's self-promotion funded by taxpayers. Jemele's frustration reflects what many Americans feel: a demand for leaders who serve the public, not their own ego.
Building to remind people of his presence because he's so insecure and such a narcissist. And I don't think people like
forget
those.
Donald Trump if he wasn't doing that. He completely
That's
fails.
the thing. It's like it's just over the top. And
I will say I agree with you a bit on that. Like, I hate it when you ever go into a new state and welcome to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Like every city, the city of New York's doing this. Mayor Eric Adams. It's every obviously not on the level of Donald Trump, but every politician tries to kind of take credit for things and using, in this case, taxpayer dollars in a way to promote yourself.
Right. Well, and then let's not forget, he also doesn't have the greatest taste. So, I am very curious as to what this all
Yeah,
might
it's going to be dripping in gold for sure.
Right.
But the other thing that he's doing right now, because frankly, who gonna check me, boo, is he's bombing whoever he wants and killing a lot of people. And here's what he said earlier this week when he was asked about whether or not he needed to consult with Congress in any way on this.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead.
Future Nobel Peace Prize winner, Donald J. Trump.
Well, kind of like the previous Nobel Peace Prize winner Barack Obama, who did actually kill an American citizen with a drone.
One intentionally, one accidentally.
With the drone attack. Not that I'm not. I'm just saying.
Sure, I'm not here to defend
kind
any president.
Look, and you're right, and you are right about that. But I think the one thing is, at least we knew who he killed at that
Right.
time. I mean, I think
Eventually.
in this situation, the Department of Defense and Trump have basically calculated correctly that nobody is going to say anything because who cares about these fishermen and who they are? You just bomb people to send a message and call it a day. But I guess, do you think that there are any downsides to this? That when we set a precedent in the world that people just drop bombs and ask questions later, I mean, does that really make us safer?
A precedent's been set, though. This is not anything new. I mean, I wish it was, right?
But I mean,
and that's the case with so many elements of this
maybe,
administration.
but precedent's been set by who? I feel like when we put the United
Barack
States
Obama,
in the same,
George H.
no,
W.
but I'm
Bush.
talking about what is the justification, right? And then if we put ourselves in the same bucket as the Russias of the world, or the Houthis, or whatever it is, like the other people who act kind of lawlessly on the global stage, I don't think that's the category of states that we want to be aligned with.
This exchange between Jemele Hill and Abby Phillip versus Kelly Jane Torrance perfectly captures the moral whiplash of how America approaches power and accountability. I'm siding with Jemele and Abby here, not because of partisan loyalty, but because they're exposing something deeply uncomfortable, the normalization of reckless force under the guise of strength. When Jemele calls out Trump's over-the-top self-promotion and his cavalier attitude towards military action, she's not exaggerating. She's identifying a dangerous mindset, the idea that a president can just bomb whoever he wants without congressional oversight isn't leadership, it's lawlessness. And Abby makes an essential point. Once we start dropping bombs without justification or transparency, we're no longer setting the global standard for democracy. We're joining the ranks of nations we once condemned for their disregard of human rights. Kelly tries to argue that this kind of behavior isn't new, that Obama and other presidents have done similar things. But that argument misses the mark entirely. A bad precedent doesn't justify repeating it, it should be a warning to stop it. What Trump is doing differently is erasing the pretense of moral restraint. He's not acting in secrecy or under necessity. He's boasting about it publicly, turning military aggression into political theater. Jemele's frustration is valid because this isn't just about policy. It's about what kind of country we want to be. If America's power becomes defined by ego, vengeance, and unchecked authority, then we're not protecting democracy. We're dismantling it from the inside. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.